There is a question underneath almost every political argument, every debate about how we raise children, every tension between what you want and what you're supposed to do. The question is simple, but the answer changes everything about how you actually live. Do you belong to yourself? Or do you belong to something bigger than you? Well, this question determines whether you pursue your dreams or sacrifice them for your family and your community, whether you follow your conscience or you follow orders, and whether you actually see yourself as an individual trying to make your own way in life or as a part of something that existed before you and will continue after you're gone. For the last few hundred years, two completely opposite answers to this question have been fighting for control of how we organize society, raise kids, and understand what it means to actually live a good life. One side says that you are fundamentally an individual. You have your own mind, your own goals, and your own life to live. Society simply exists to protect your freedom to pursue whatever you think will make you flourish. Essentially, you belong to you. But the other side says that you are fundamentally part of a larger whole. You're a member of a family, a community, a nation, and even a tradition that stretches across generations. Your identity comes from your role in that larger body, or you belong to the group. Now, these are fundamentally different ways of understanding what a human being is. Depending on which one you accept, everything else follows. What you think freedom means, whether pursuing your own happiness is a virtue or a vice. The philosophical foundation for individualism was laid out by John Locke in the late 1600s. Locke was a writer in England after decades of religious warfare and political upheaval. People had essentially been offing each other over whose version of Christianity should control the state. Monarchs claimed absolute power over their subjects. Locke's radical idea was that you actually own yourself, that you are born with certain natural rights that exist before any government, church, or authority can give them to you. You have a right to life, liberty, and the property that you create through your own labor. Nobody else gets to decide what you do with those things unless you voluntarily agree to it. And for most of human history, you were born into a role. If you were born a peasant, you were a peasant. If you were born into a particular religion, that was your religion. Your obligations were determined by your position in a hierarchy that nobody really could question. But Locke decided no, that you actually get to decide and you get to choose your own path in life. You can pursue whatever you think will make your life good. And this philosophy shaped how Locke thought about education. He argued that children should never see learning as a task imposed on them from the outside. Education should work with their natural curiosity and desire to explore. Let them play and follow their own interests. Help them develop into whoever they are capable of becoming. He was very explicit about this. Great care should be taken that children never see education as a burden. Because we naturally love liberty from the time we are in our cradles. We have an aversion to things simply because they are commanded. Good education works with that independent spirit rather than crushing it. And he also opposed harsh punishments. He thought children who were most severely punished rarely became the best adults. So you need to set a good example and let children learn by watching what you do. Trust that they will want to become good people if you actually show them what a good person looks like. And this philosophy deeply influenced the American founding: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Government exists to secure your individual rights. You should be able to worship as you choose, speak as you choose, and associate with whom you choose. But there is another side. The philosophical foundation for collectivism was laid out by different thinkers, but one of the most influential was Immanuel Kant in the late 1700s. Kant approached morality from a completely different angle than Locke. For Kant, the problem with Locke's vision was that it made everything about what you want, your inclinations, your desires, and your pursuit of happiness. But Kant thought morality cannot be based on what the individual wants. It has to be based on what you ought to do, regardless of what you want to do. Kant distinguished between inclination and duty. That inclination is what you are naturally drawn to, what you want, what feels good or satisfying. But duty is what you're obligated to do, whether you want to or not. And Kant was very clear about which one mattered more. Duty comes first. And Kant had a reason for this thinking, because life involves obligations. You have to pay your taxes whether you want to or not. You have to do what your job requires whether you feel like it or not. You have responsibilities to your family, your community, and your country that don't really depend on your feelings about them. If we raise children to only do what they're inclined to do, we would be setting them up to fail as adults. We would essentially be creating people who can't handle the demands that life necessarily places on us. So, Kant argued that education should be about learning obedience. And above all things, obedience is essential in the character of a child. Johann Fichte, a follower of Kant, took these ideas a little further. Fichte was writing in the early 1800s after Germany had been defeated by Napoleon. He saw this defeat as fundamentally a moral and philosophical failure. Germans had absorbed too many foreign ideas about individual rights and personal liberty. These ideas, Fichte argued, were corrupting. Fichte's vision was explicitly collectivism. You are not primarily an individual, but part of a larger body. Your identity comes from your membership in that body, and your purpose is to serve the collective good, not your own personal interests. He wanted to fashion an entirely new self through education. But what would that look like? Well, first, it would be a universal and uniform education. Every child gets the same education, learns the same things in the same way, so that everybody thinks the same way. Second, the new education must completely destroy freedom of will and produce strict necessity in decisions. A well-educated child would find it unthinkable to disobey a command or to refuse a duty. And third, and most controversially, it would completely separate children from their parents as early and completely as possible. Because parents represent diversity of values and ideas, and that diversity is a problem. Children need to be continuously under the influence of the proper education and kept from contact with corrupting outside forces. Fourth, it would be extremely severe. Many rules, all enforced absolutely and without exception. Any transgression brings immediate punishment. The goal was to produce graduates who were, in Fichte's words, fixed and unchangeable machines. The collectivist vision says that you should forget about yourself, that there is only one virtue, and that is to forget your own personhood. You exist to serve something larger. Your happiness doesn't matter. What you want doesn't matter. What matters is what you owe. Now, let's look at what it actually means to live according to these two conflicting philosophies. If you live according to individualism, your life is fundamentally about your own choices and projects. You decide what matters to you, what kind of person you want to become, and you pursue relationships because you want them, not because you're obligated to be in them. And this can be incredibly freeing. You're not trapped in roles determined by your birth. You're born into a religious tradition, but you don't have to believe in it because you can leave. If you're in a career that makes you miserable, you can just change careers. You can experiment and try different ways of living. But individualism does have its problems. If everyone is pursuing their own vision of what the good life is, what holds society together? If you can leave any commitment whenever it stops serving your interests, how do we build anything stable? Individualism can lead to isolation. If you're responsible for creating your own identity and your own meaning, well, that's a really heavy burden. And you can fail. You can make the wrong choices. You can end up alone because you prioritize your own interests over maintaining relationships. And that's selfish. If morality is about respecting individual rights and freedoms, what happens when someone uses their freedom destructively? Individualism struggles with the fact that we are not actually isolated atoms. We are born into families that we didn't choose, we inherit languages and cultures that we didn't create, and we actually do depend on others in ways that we simply can't escape. If you live according to collectivism, your life is fundamentally about your role in something larger. You're a member of a family, so you have obligations to your parents, your siblings, and your children. You're a citizen, so you owe duties to your country. And this can actually provide some sense of meaning. You're part of something that existed before and will continue after you're gone. You're contributing to something greater than you, and it provides belonging. Your identity comes from your membership. You know who you are because you know where you fit. But collectivism has its problems. If your identity comes entirely from your role in the group, what happens when the group demands something immoral? If you're taught that duty matters more than personal judgment, then how do you resist when the collective goes wrong? Collectivism can crush individuality. If everyone is supposed to think the same way and pursue the same goals, then there's no room for people who are different. And it can also enable tyranny. If you belong to the collective rather than yourself, then the collective can demand anything it wants from you: your time, your labor, and even your life. Collectivism struggles with the fact that groups don't actually think or feel or even want the same things. Individuals do. When we talk about the nation or the community, we're really talking about the specific people making decisions and claiming to represent everyone else. And those people might be wrong. So, which philosophy is right? Well, the honest answer is that neither pure individualism nor pure collectivism captures the full truth about human existence. We are individuals with our own minds, our own experiences, and our own capacity to make choices. Nobody else can live your life for you. Nobody else can decide what will make your life meaningful. But we are also fundamentally social beings who develop in relationships and depend on others. Every time you go to the grocery store, somebody else put that food there. Somebody stocked those shelves. Somebody was in a factory creating the food. Somebody was growing the plants, and somebody was raising the animals that you consume. You didn't create yourself from scratch. You learned language from other people. Your opportunities were shaped by the society that you were born into, and you can't flourish by yourself. So the question becomes how to balance those truths. How do we respect individual freedom while also maintaining these social structures that make freedom possible? Well, different societies have answered this in very different ways. Liberal democracies tend to lean individualists. They emphasize individual rights, limited government, and personal freedom. More traditional and authoritarian societies tend to lean collectivist. They emphasize duty, hierarchy, obligation, and sacrifice for the group. But most societies exist somewhere on a spectrum between these two extremes. They recognize both individual rights and social obligations and protect personal freedom while also expecting people to fulfill certain duties. But there is tension. The tension shows up when we think about morality itself. Is it moral to pursue your own happiness? Or is morality specifically about sacrificing your happiness for others? Most ethical frameworks try to balance these two ideas. Act in ways that respect both your own dignity and that of others. These questions don't have simple answers because they're asking us to weigh genuine values against each other. Individual freedom is valuable, but social cohesion is also valuable. Sometimes these values are going to conflict, but what matters is being clear about the trade-offs. When you emphasize individualism, you gain freedom and diversity, but you risk isolation and social fragmentation. And when you emphasize collectivism, you might gain belonging and shared purpose, but risk conformity and oppression. Neither extreme works. Pure individualism, where you owe nothing to anyone, creates a war against everybody and everything. Nobody cooperates, nobody sacrifices, and society will eventually collapse. But pure collectivism, where you exist only to serve the group, creates a prison where nobody can breathe, dissent, be creative, and nobody really has their own life. The difficult work is figuring out where between these extremes you should be. And that's harder than just picking a side, but it's probably closer to how we actually have to live. So, with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see y'all next time.